This is real for our children. I am definitely for our kids getting back to school safely and feel as a mom and as a professional healthcare worker that opening up our schools to in-person class is safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the last of our call-in speakers. Then I'll be reading the 6 letters. Everybody had an option to either speak or to send in a written statement. So I'll begin reading those. The first one is from Dee Salas. Dee says, "It is so important that our kids who can't go to school face-to-face be able to do so. I have 2 daughters, one in middle school and one going into high school. I think it's important more than ever that we get back to real learning and real teaching. My kids did not do well at all from March to June with virtual schooling. It is not the same as in-person learning. Both of my daughters are straight A students, and my youngest was resistant, depressed, and almost never left her room. Not only the in-person teaching, but the social skills required to be in school are so important to their mental well-being. If our district does not offer in-person teaching, I will be forced to go to a charter school or somewhere that will offer face-to-face learning. I respect our teachers and want what is best for their health and safety, as well as my kids, and face-to-face learning is vital for the future of my children." The next letter comes from Kelly Van Singel. "Dear school board members, I am a parent of 3 middle schoolers and 1 high schooler. I understand teachers' concerns of going back to school, as I myself am a teacher. However, our kids need to go back to school. The negative consequences of the kids not being in school far outweigh the consequences of COVID. My children need social interaction. Some of my children have not seen any friends since we left school in March. My children also need in-person learning. My high schooler trying to do complicated math does not work. She needs a teacher who she can talk to, discuss problems with, and have interaction with. If you look around at any park during the summer, it has been wall-to-wall children. So children have been interacting with each other all summer with no major cases. As far as the teachers being scared to go back for fear of them catching the virus, this is their job as essential workers now. The importance of teaching our children should come above any fear of catching the virus. The state has many guidelines in place to protect the teachers and staff at schools. This is unacceptable for our children to not be educated in the classroom. How long are we supposed to wait to get our children back to a normal day? One filled without anxiety and fear. As a teacher, I know that some children's best part of the day is being at school where they are fed, educated, and loved. Another concern I have is the fact that if kids are not at school, they will be at daycare centers because parents have to work, which does not make sense to me at all. How can we say that children attending daycare all day long is acceptable, but not attending schools? Please take these points into consideration and let the kids go back to school." The next letter comes from Christy Kleeman. "I have sons in 9th and 4th grade. They are in desperate need of not only interaction with other students, but also with the very well-educated and knowledgeable staff of the ECSD. One requires assistance for both speech and reading services that, while they could be accommodated at home, will perform and excel with in-person instruction. At-home instruction has proven itself futile and very unproductive. As for concerns about mask use, I've already been impressed with the importance both of my children place on use of their mask and the importance of using it consistently. My son, who has asked daily since preschool to stay home, wants to return to school. He misses his classmates and his teachers. Please direct the appropriate precautions. Please put policies in place to help keep them safe. Please help them feel some newly adjusted sort of normal. They are yearning for it." The next letter comes from Lauren Martin. "Our children need to go back to school. They deserve to go back to school. Our district has graciously provided both online and in-person options. Taking this choice away will be detrimental to our school district and, more importantly, our children. School is a safe haven for some, a creative outlet for others, but the social interactions with other people than who you live with is invaluable. next letter comes from Brianne Distelrad. As a parent of a soon-to-be fifth grader at St. Clair Middle School, I struggle that the option of face-to-face learning will no longer be an option. Our daughter needs the classmates. Online learning will bring the distraction of concentration on the program itself and what is truly being taught. After these last almost 5 months, our children do not need any more new distractions. I have all the confidence in our superintendent, Board of Education, and ultimately our teachers. Please continue to offer face-to-face learning as an option for this upcoming school year. Thank you. Our last letter comes from Lisa Brodsky. To the members of the East China School Board, my name is Lisa Brodsky, a teacher in the East China School District beginning her 30th year. I want to start my letter by thanking you for your years of service and gratitude for always working for the best interests of our students. This job in recent years has become one of great challenges and heart-wrenching decision-making. Those decisions that impact our greatest gifts can't be easy, and so I want to take this time to personally thank you. As an educator who loves what I do and am not near ready to retire, I too have had to make decisions that impact our greatest gifts. This letter is one of those decisions. I am writing to you in support of the students of East China School District beginning the 2020-21 school year full-time and in person while following the appropriate and necessary safety protocols outlined by the county. I know it won't be easy, but I believe it is of the utmost importance and worth the commitment. Our youngest learners, like the students in my first grade classroom, are most successful when they are fully engaged in their learning and they feel loved and celebrated by someone they are able to make connections with. As teachers, on a daily basis, we meet their needs, whether they are academic, social, emotional, or basic needs of hunger and well-being. We build a sense of community with our kids. We give them confidence, build joy, share their geniuses. Even if we are wearing masks, cleaning tabletops and supplies, washing hands, using hand sanitizer, and providing bubble space with our kids, we need to be there physically every day. It is essential that we are in front of our students and not behind a computer screen or in person on alternating days. Teachers, families, and most importantly, students need that consistent routine, sense of security, and personal social reactions with both adults and peers, something where they would not have the opportunity to receive through a fully virtual or hybrid model of learning. As the world is full of uncertainty, I believe we are in a place of possibility. We can be at the forefront of getting kids back to school in a safe manner with great minds collaborating, hard work, and the belief that this is truly best for the academic and social emotional growth of our students. I am not naive in knowing that things will be different. But different doesn't mean bad, it just means different. And I have confidence we can make it a great year for our greatest gifts, the students of East China School District. With great confidence in ECSD, Lisa Brodsky, first grade teacher here in elementary. Okay, so that wraps up the public portion of our meeting this evening and persons wishing to address the board. The next item on our agenda will be the COVID-19 preparedness response plan. Mrs. Sykes-Muller. I'm glad somebody else to be able to talk now. Thank you.
Thank you, President Frank and members of the board. Before I begin, I just want to make sure that we get the presentation up. And there it is.
And we are good.
Thank you, Chris. On June 30th, 2020, Michigan's governor released our Return to School Roadmap. The roadmap outlined the required and recommended safety protocols that school districts needed to put in place in order to begin the planning for a safe return to school for the 2021 school year. Prior to June 30th, we were waiting to see what the protocols would be and whether or not we would be allowed to attend to school in a face-to-face format. So on June 30th, we were informed by the governor that if we put these safety protocols in place, being in phase 4, that we would be allowed to return to face-to-face instruction. Craig, if you could move it forward one slide, please. Thank you. The roadmap that the governor set forth on June 30th also required that a plan, a COVID-19 response and preparedness plan outlining these safety protocols be approved by each local school board by August 15th and then submitted to our local RESA or ISDs by August 17th. The return to school roadmap that the governor released on June 30th was developed by a group of diverse stakeholders across the state of Michigan. This included Board of Education members, parents, teachers, principals, superintendents, medical professionals, police, and psychologists. The roadmap includes requirements and recommendations for schools to follow for reopening in phases 4, 5, and 6. It also informs us that we would not be able to open for in-person instruction in phases 1 through 3. Craig, if you could move it forward 2 slides, please. Thank you. This slide is just a graphic showing where the phase 4 has us in the phases of the pandemic recovery. And in phase 4, again, we were allowed to return to in-person instruction with those requirements and safety protocols in place. Next slide. Just as a reminder, I know many have seen this map before, but as a reminder, the state of Michigan is broken into regions that are used for the phasing and the pandemic recovery. And St. Clair County is included in the Detroit region, Region 1, where other regions, and we're all in 4, except for regions 6 and 8 that are in phase 5 of the pandemic recovery. Next slide. As mentioned in some of the information and letters from our community members, it is extremely important that we continue to follow the medical and science data that we have available to us on this pandemic. And what this slide shows is the average number of COVID cases per day, per week. Those are the blue bars that you see. And the orange or reddish colored line is the number of positive cases. So you can see that the trending of the positive cases is on a downward trend. Currently in St. Clair County, as of today, our infection rate is 0.83, which that is calculated by taking the total number of infections in the county, dividing it by the population of our county, giving us the low infection rate of 0.83. And as stated earlier, but important to reiterate, that currently, as of last Friday's update, there are 0 hospitalizations for COVID in St. Clair County. So important that we continue to focus on the science and the medical information available to us as we make these decisions moving forward. Next slide. So the COVID-19 preparedness and response plan that the Board of Education will be considering this evening provides to the Board of Education the assurances that East China School District has planned for the implementation of all the required and many of the strongly recommended protocols for each of the categories in Phase 4 of the roadmap. Now, the timeline for the approval of this plan, which was August 15th, was set by the Governor's Return to School roadmap. East China School District currently has a Return to School committee made up of teachers and administrators that are meeting on a weekly basis that will continue planning all the way up until the first day of school. The timeline that was set forth is one that we need to stick to in order to be in compliance with the roadmap, but certainly doesn't mean that we're done planning. One section of this preparedness and response plan asks about the instruction. And ECSD, East China School District, is planning to offer our families 2 options, the in-person instruction and the virtual learning option. Now, keeping in mind the purpose of this preparedness and response plan is outlined by the governor is for us to identify health and safety protocols in order to return to learning. And what it's asking our school boards is to approve the fact that we've identified these required protocols and that we've made plans to implement them. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, the return to school roadmap in the 6 phases, in phases 1 through 3, schools would need to remain closed with remote instruction only. Phase 4, where Region 1, where St. Clair County currently is, we are able to open with stringent required safety protocols. And then phase 5 would be we'd be able to open with moderate, and phase 6 open with minimal safety protocols. Next slide. So in phase 5, I thought it would be important to highlight some of the required safety protocols that are all included in East China's preparedness and response plan. One of the required safety protocols that causes a lot of discussion and conversation and planning is the face covering or masks. So face coverings are required to be worn by all staff in phase 4. They're required to be worn by everyone on a bus. They're required to be worn in hallways and common areas for pre-K through 12. They're required to be worn in classrooms for all grades 6 through 12. The face coverings are required to be worn in K-5 if we switch classrooms or in common areas. We're required as a school district to provide hygiene supplies and education on how to use them. We're required to cooperate with our local health department, with the St. Clair County Health Department, for screening and staff of students. We're required to work with the health department if a confirmed case is identified, and we're required to work with them in collecting the contact information. Indoor assemblies are not prohibited, or they're prohibited. We're not allowed to have them. We have to clean frequently touched surface areas every 4 hours. Libraries, labs, art rooms must be cleaned after every class period and will comply with MHSAA and NFHS regulations on our athletics. Next slide. Continuing with some of the required protocols, safety protocols that are all included in our preparedness and response plan. Athletics. Spectators must wear a face covering, maintain social distancing. Right now we're limited to 100 people in an outdoor with no indoor events. Athletics, no shared equipment. Hand sanitizers is required for students before boarding a bus. All the bus drivers will be required to wear face masks. We have to clean and disinfect all the buses before and after each route. We are required to create a plan for getting students home if they're not allowed to board a bus. If a student is sick during the day, they will not be allowed to ride a bus home. We will be cleaning and airing out our buses between all of our trips, and we will keep the windows open as long as weather permitting will allow us to do that on all of our buses. So these are by no means all of the required safety protocols that are included in the preparedness and response plan, but I wanted to highlight a few of them that we are receiving questions on and clarify them for those that are watching the presentation tonight. Next slide. So one of the return to school roadmap, the governor gave the authority to local health departments in testing and screening and contact tracing. So you may have heard other school districts and other counties had released their health screening and testing procedures, wondering why maybe East China School District hadn't released ours. Well, each county is relying upon their health department to release the protocols. It's outlined in the roadmap. So the St. Clair County Health Department protocols were released on July 31st, and they are now on our website. So on the East China School District website, we have all of the St. Clair County Health Department protocol documents linked to our FAQ document on our website. But a couple of things to highlight: students who are positive must remain out of school until cleared by the health department. Contact information for anyone who has had close contact with a positive case will be provided to the health department. There are self-monitoring forms that are also included on our FAQ document on the website that have been posted there for students and staff. All of our students that return for face-to-face instruction and all of our staff must complete the self-monitoring forms each day. The school district, East China School District, will send letters home if we do have a positive case in our schools. Those letters will come from the school district. We will not be releasing any names for privacy reasons, but we will be informing families. And the health department is responsible for contacting students and staff and creating those investigations and making the contact tracing and providing recommendations for testing. So the health department was given this authority by the governor to provide local control so that each county would be responsible for its health and screening protocols. Next slide. I mentioned earlier that the East China School District is offering two options for our families for learning for 2021 school year. The traditional face-to-face model and a fully virtual option for those that may be reluctant to return to school quite yet. Now, in order for us to provide the detail that some of our families are looking for in these daily schedules, we are waiting, all Michigan school districts are still waiting on MDE and our state legislators to give us the guidance on days, hours, and attendance for a school day. Currently, we're still under the guidelines that were there last year and in previous years that we need to go to school 180 days for 1,098 hours and have 75% physical attendance in our district every day in order to receive our full state funding. None of those requirements have been waived or changed. We're waiting on our legislatures to do that. Once we have those guidelines adjusted, we will be able to provide and create daily instructional schedules for both in-person learning and for our virtual students. For all of our learning for 2021, both in-person and online, the guiding premise for us from the very beginning with all of our teams that have been meeting is that our classes in East China will be taught by East China School District teachers with East China School District curriculum. Those connections with our teachers are at the heart of learning, in the heart of what we do every day, and we wanted that to stay true through whether it was an online experience or an in-person experience for our students. Because there will be a time that we will be on the other side of this pandemic, and we want those connections and those teachers and our curriculum to be a part of the learning for our students. Next slide. So for phase 4, the learning option of face-to-face in East China School District would be in school 5 days a week, starting on our start date of September 8th. Now, the conditions of attendance will be based on the requirements determined by MDE in the Michigan legislatures. As soon as they make the determination of what attendance or engagement is for our students, we'll be able to share that with our families and create those detailed schedules. Classes will issue academic grades, will permit athletics and extracurricular activities as allowed by MSHAA in the Phase 4 requirements. And we will be required to transition to virtual instruction if at any point we move back to phase 3 in the pandemic recovery. Next slide. What may look like at our secondary buildings, which is 6 to 12, with the face-to-face instruction option. As mentioned, under the health department, parents will screen their children before dropping them off at school or putting them on a bus. Again, those screeners, those daily screeners are on our website underneath our FAQ document. Students on buses will wear masks and sanitize their hands each time they enter the bus. Students will be required to wear masks in the classrooms in grades 6 through 12. Students will be spaced for greater social distancing. We will not share supplies. Classrooms will be cleaned between each class period. Masks will not be worn when eating and outside, but spacing is still required during those times. And in accordance with Phase 4, assemblies and field trips will not be allowed. Next slide. Again, as a reminder, before daily instructional schedule with specifics can be released, we need our legislatures and MDE to give us guidance on the day, hours, and attendance for a school day. Next slide. One of the ideas that has been worked on during our secondary return to school meetings is creating a hybrid or a different type of schedule than our normal schedule in order to reach two goals. We want to reduce the number of points of contact between teachers and students, and we want to reduce the amount of classes that students have each day with increasing the number of lunch periods, again, creating the spacing that we need, in addition to providing teachers with additional time to reach both their virtual students and their in-person students by releasing early each day. So, for example, again, this is just in development, but so that folks can understand what our return to school committees are working on and the goals of reducing and mitigating the risk of the spread of the virus. By reducing those points of contact, you'll see that we would possibly run 3 classes a day, 4 lunches a day, and increase passing time. Wednesday, we're showing a possible PLC each Wednesday, which would allow for our teachers to work with each other in their PLC and their collaborative content groups on a weekly basis in order to help and support each other as we move through this pandemic and reaching our virtual and in-person students. Next slide. So at our elementary buildings, what face-to-face instruction may look like. Again, parents will need to screen their children before dropping them off at school or latchkey or putting them on a bus. Again, those screeners are on our website. Students on buses or at latchkey will wear masks and sanitize their hands. Students are encouraged to wear masks in the classrooms. Students will be spaced for greater social distancing, and also cohorting will be keeping the same group of students together to, again, mitigate the risk of spreading the virus. Students will not share supplies. Special classes may come to the students, or if allowed, if we're cohorting enough, we'll allow the students to go to their specials in a cohort. Classrooms will be cleaned between each class period. Again, as with the secondary, masks won't be worn when eating and outside, but that spacing will be required, and again, no assemblies or field trips allowed during the phase 4 of the pandemic recovery. Next slide. The virtual option at our elementary schools may have these features. Students are not on campus during the school day. Instruction, again, this was our emphasis and our guiding principle. Instruction is taught online by ECSD teachers using ECSD curriculum. Instructional time, again, will be determined by MDE and the Michigan legislative decisions, especially for the elementary online. We're waiting to see what percentage of in-person instruction and asynchronous instruction is required. Grades will be given, attendance will be taken through student engagement. The definition of student engagement is still something we're waiting on. Technology devices will be provided by request and as available. And our virtual students will be eligible to participate in any extracurricular activities and athletics that are running during phase 4. And we're asking students and families to commit to 1 semester of virtual learning so that we can balance and space our face-to-face instruction in the most maximum way possible. Next slide. One sample that we shared with our families, our elementary families, to help them understand what a virtual day may look like is that we would have about 40% or 90 minutes a day of instruction, and then 60% or 135 minutes a day of independent work for grades K through 2, and then increasing those minutes for grades 3 through 5. Again, as the schedule is showing here, this is tentative because we're waiting for guidance from our legislatures in order to create specific daily schedules. Next slide. So to summarize the steps that I've been taking, and again, this is not our complete list because our teams are continuing to meet and the planning will continue all the way up until September 8th, their first day of school. But to just outline some of the steps that we have been working through, 4 surveys have been completed, 2 to families and 2 to our staff, and we currently have the online commitment survey out right now asking families if they would like the online option to select that so we can begin to balance our schedules. We've had 7 virtual instruction committee meetings with participation from 52 teachers and administrators. We've had LMS training last week and this week, 3 days each week. Those are the learning management systems trainings. The 3 learning management systems selected by East Trenton School District were Seesaw, Google, and Blackboard. We've had return to school committee meetings held with each one of our school buildings, and they continue to meet on a weekly basis. The school nurse services have been doubled throughout the school district. We're hiring substitute teachers that will be assigned to specific buildings to mitigate risk exposure so that we don't have substitute teachers coming from other school districts into our buildings or moving from different buildings. We're going to keep those within our school buildings. Disposable face masks have been ordered and will be provided to students as needed. Clear face masks were ordered for staff and will be provided. Face shields and gloves are available if requested. Touchless thermometers, designated sick rooms, and installed plexiglass barriers in all the offices. Sanitizers are being installed throughout all of the school buildings. Floor stickers, signage, and posters have been ordered for each school building. Enhanced cleaning efforts, including rigorous bus sanitizing, will be done. Instructional spaces are being modified to comply with those Phase 4 requirements. Additional Chromebooks have been ordered for those students who do not have a device and may choose our virtual learning option. And staff will be trained in the COVID-19 and student health mental issues. Now again, this is not a comprehensive or complete list, but with some of the frequently asked questions that we've been receiving in our office and including in our documents, I wanted to highlight some of these steps to summarize the direction the East China School District is taking for a safe return on September 8th. We will continue to update our community and our families as the planning process works through the next few weeks, getting us to September 8th. And I want to thank again, as I did at the beginning of the board meeting, our return to school committee members, our teams that have been so positive and proactive in getting our schools back, or getting our students back in our schools in a safe and healthy manner. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is our action item for this evening, and that's the COVID-19 preparedness and response plan. I'll read the motion, and it will have to be moved and supported in order to open up this evening's discussion and debate. The administration's recommendation, the Board of Education approves the COVID-19 preparedness and response plan as reviewed and written at the August 10, 2020 Special Board of Education meeting. The motion is needed.
So moved. Support.
Okay, so any comments or questions?
I have several.
Okay.
If I know the answer to some of these, but I think it would be important for others to hear. On page 9, it talks about our code of conduct for students who did not wear masks. What exactly does that state?
Let me get there.
It's on page 12 of our document on page 9.
Page 9 of the preparedness and response plan reads, the student code of conduct addresses failure to follow school rules, which will include the requirement to wear a face covering. If a student or parent objects to wearing a face covering, they should consider selecting the ECSD virtual learning option. The wearing a face mask, as outlined, as I outlined in the presentation, and as outlined in the roadmap for Phase 4 in grades 6 through 12 and in common areas for elementary students, is not an option. They have to wear the face mask. So just like in any other disciplinary action, we would give the student a chance to correct their action, and then if they're unable to do that, we would consider moving them to the ECSD virtual learning option. The governor doesn't give us any wiggle room with the wearing of masks during Phase 4.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
And the fifth graders at St. Clair Middle School will be required to wear them because they're in a 6th through 8th building?
No, they have their own hallway, so they are cohorted. They don't, they're not going to be mixing with the other grades.
Okay. So we are doing the required. Can an individual teacher, perhaps somebody with health issues or somebody that has some loved one at home with health issues, wear masks in class?
We would have to discuss that with our human resources and personnel department as far as the health issues that would need to be addressed.
Okay. All right. And on page 15 or 19 of the document, if a teacher is forced to quarantine, how will their sick days be affected?
Again, there are many different options available to teachers through the there's COVID relief legislation. So in order to know exactly what would be best for individual teachers, they would need to speak to the Human Resource Department here at East China School District in order to tailor a plan that would work specifically for their circumstances.
Okay, thank you. And as you've mentioned before, we're unable to tell the public what our day will look like because we don't know. They haven't passed their laws yet. But I do want to reiterate what you said about our teachers getting training. So in March, it ended abruptly and they hadn't had training. And now, for students who are considering virtual, the teachers have had plenty of training. And we have a letter from one of our biology teachers who talked about he won't be able to have students collaborating in class because they'll be 6 feet apart, but online he'll be able to, he calls them Zoom breakout rooms. So I want people to know that if you do choose the online, it will be different than what you saw in the spring. The teachers have had a lot more training and a lot more options and resources available to them now.
Any other questions?
I'll chime in. My biggest concern with the plan as far as the safety aspect is the social distancing. Really, with the majority of our students going back, it sounds like we have about 400 going online at this time, if correct. Everybody else would be coming back, and to be able to spread those students out 6 feet is not possible, especially in large areas, cafeterias, hallways. So can you speak to how far apart we're going to be able to get students and what that social distancing will look like?
Well, I can, according to the Phase 4 roadmap, in order for students to remove their mask in a cafeteria setting, we have to have them 6 feet apart. That, again, is not an option. That's a requirement. So we are planning, I know that all the principals are looking at their buildings, finding the maximum space in their buildings to provide a lunch location for each of their students. There's going to have to be assigned seating. So again, that we can provide the contact tracing information to the health department if need be, but we will have the 6 feet of spacing in the cafeteria. In each of the return to school committee meetings, they're discussing how best to handle the common areas and the flow in the buildings. Each building, except for Pine and Bell, have different footprints. So a plan that might work for one building may not work for another, but some of the ideas that have been discussed is staggering the movement within the hallways, letting certain classes move in one direction and then letting another class move in the other direction. But in order to find that maximum spacing, you mentioned the number of students that have selected the online option. I know that we have some families waiting for the specificity of a daily schedule in order to make their selection. So we've lengthened the time in which we're allowing people to make that selection. As we wait, we hear that the legislatures might meet this Saturday. So hoping to get some guidelines to build these real schedules moving forward so parents can make the selection. But once they have made their selection, what we're doing is balancing the rest of the classes within the school district to get that maximum spacing in the building. And remember, the elementary, their guidelines are cohorting so that the same group of students stay together all day. So as far as providing that maximum spacing, that's what we're working on right now. We are a declining school district in numbers, so we do have some square footage that we can utilize that hasn't been utilized in previous years in order to find that square feet.
So just to follow up a couple things there, do we know numbers wise? So we have 400 going online. We may have more. You're going to balance so that all the classes are about the same size. So we're anticipating 24, 25 kids in a class. Is that a fair estimate?
No, I would say that we don't know that number yet because we have a fair amount of families that are waiting to see what that online instructional piece is going to look like before they make their selection. It won't happen in an even number like that. It never does. So the spacing is going to be dependent upon which students select to be online and which students select to be in the classrooms. So when we did our survey in July, we saw that about 75% of our families wanted to come back to in-person instruction. That's about what we're seeing now in the response. But keeping in mind that we still haven't released those detailed plans, and I've got many families that have contacted me and said that they're waiting to hear what those will be before making their selection. And also, we need to utilize more of the square foot that we haven't used in the past. So I know it would be great if we could just say you take 25% out and there's the balance, but our classes, especially at the secondary level with the electives, they just don't work that way.
Which means some classes will be small enough to social distance. I mean, basically, some classes to go with 6 feet of spacing, 12, maybe 15 kids to be 6 feet apart. That's probably a max number would be 15. And so we are going to have classes that are going to be much larger than 15. And so they're going to be, is there a minimum distance that we're comfortable with kids being apart from each other in a classroom?
Well, the original guideline was 3 to 6 feet through the Pediatric Association. So we would work within that guideline, but as long as the students are masked, which they're required to wear face coverings in grades 6 through 12, the 6 feet of distance is not a requirement to return to school safely, keeping in mind that these recommendations and required protocols were put together by physicians based on medical evidence. So to use what they're saying we need to do in order to return to school safely is the masking in order for us to return to school using this plan.
So one of the things that Terry Mullane was our first speaker and spoke on behalf of the teachers union, and one of the things that she mentioned was to follow the MEA recommendations, which includes following the strongly recommended requirements, not just the requirements, but the strongly recommended, which includes social distancing. So what's the response to Terry and the ECEA regarding that first item of following all strongly recommended requirements?
Yeah, I reviewed the recommendation by the ECEA, and one of the things that prior to tonight's meeting that I wanted to go through, I went through every single one of the categories that are required for this preparedness and response plan, and highlighted the areas where we implemented the strongly recommended categories. So I'd be happy to, when we put this up on our website, keep that highlighted area so folks can see where we have not only done just with the required protocols, but also put in place the strongly recommended protocols, which for every category, almost every category, we have included the strongly recommended protocols as well as required protocols. And I just want to update our numbers because I'm receiving that information. We have about 500 students choosing online right now, again, with many more waiting to commit, and that gives us about a 73% face-to-face percentage. So again, the numbers will continue to come in. We'll continue to look at them and see how we can best find that maximum spacing in our secondary classrooms.
Going back to the cafeteria, you said you're going to guarantee 6 feet of spacing. Will everybody be facing one direction in the cafeteria like they are in the classroom?
Correct.
So does that require? I know how cafeteria tables are usually those big long things with seats attached. What's that mean for furniture? Do we have to get different furniture in the cafeterias, or do we have what we need to accommodate? Are we going to have more lunch periods than normal?
Yeah.
How are we going to manage the 6 feet and everybody facing one direction?
We're building in more lunch periods than we've had in the past. So if you look at that tentative schedule that the return to school committees are looking at, there's 4 lunches built into each one of those plans. And principals are also looking at other areas within their school besides the cafeteria that they could use for that maximum spacing.
So will that require like more lunch monitors, longer hours for lunch monitors? Is that part of that?
Yes.
Plan?
Yep.
What about going back to the classrooms, the cleaning aspect? We're required to clean between every class when they leave. So what will that look like? Who's doing the cleaning? What products are being used? Like, explain that, please.
Sure. Well, our director of operations has secured, and this was discussed at our district return to school committee update this morning, an avenue for which Clorox wipes right now are very difficult to come by. So one of our cleaning companies has come up with a solution in order to provide each classroom with the sanitizing wipes necessary. They have a system, it's a bucket system in which the paper towels are put into the bucket and the solution is poured over, the lid is put on, and then we now have the wipes. And the solution that is used has a 10-second kill rate for the virus. So it's immediate within 10 seconds. Once you wipe it on a desk or a surface, then the surface will be ready for the next student. And one of the solutions for cleaning in between the classes at the secondary level, the teachers were discussing and administrators were discussing, have students wipe off their desk before they leave their classroom and dispose of the wipe in the basket on their way out. So that gives us that 10-second amount of time that's needed to kill the virus on the surface.
What will the hallways look like? So the kids will wipe off their desk, throw their thing away on the way out the door, and head out the door. What will the hallways look like?
Well, that's what's all being discussed in each of the individual return to school committee meetings, because each of our buildings looks a little bit different in its physical footprint in planning for what that will look like. Some of the ideas discussed was, possibly using some of the pathways between hallways that have outdoor doors, so you go out and come in. So there's many different options that are being looked at, but those are individual to each of the buildings, and those are the plans that are being discussed in those return to school committees. The only 2 buildings that may have similar plans are Pine and Bell River, because they have the same footprint, and they're working together. They're working together on the return to school committee.
So the other area, as far as spacing of students, is transportation. Do we have a max number for how many we plan on putting on a bus? What will their spacing on buses look like?
Well, the spacing on the buses, again, according to the phase 4 requirements, is that they all wear masks and wear hand sanitizer before they're allowed on the bus. So the idea that the transportation department is discussing is putting siblings together in a seat so that they're cohorted with their siblings, and a seating chart will be developed for each one of the school buses. One of the options during our survey was that the families chose whether or not they were going to use our transportation service for East China School District so that we could develop routes and create seating charts for that maximum spacing possible on our bus. And if I'm remembering the survey results, it's about 50-50 right now as to whether people will select using our bus service. But
So the only people sharing a seat would be siblings?
When kids are on the bus, as long as they are wearing a mask, the spacing requirement is not required in the phase 4 return to school. But what we're going to do, and why we had families let us know if they're going to use our busing service, is so that we could create routes with the maximum spacing in those seats, knowing that we will put siblings next to each other and all students will be wearing masks.
So just moving away now, social distancing was my big concern. I just, again, don't see, I know we're still waiting on numbers to come in, but 73% of our kids is still a lot of kids, so it will be crowded. What about transitioning from, I get, my concern, I have some concern about teachers' responsibility to teach both virtual and in person at the same time, and being able to transition from one to the other. The transition could happen if we go to phase 3. The transition could happen if we find out that we have an illness and people need to quarantine. So what will be the teacher's responsibility as far as teaching both styles and transitioning from one to the next?
Well, one of the things that was critical in why the plan that you're looking at has planning for phase 1 through 3, phase 4, and phase 5 is because we have to be able to pivot or transition between those phases efficiently. Unlike the March 13th abrupt closure, when we weren't ready to quickly transition to an online learning option, the state is making us be prepared for that situation if it were to occur. So we have all of our teachers being trained, or the option for them to be trained, in those 3 training dates last week, the 3 training dates this week, and we're going to offer some more. The RISA has Google training set up for teachers to receive hours. But the reason for the planning, the way that it is, and why this preparedness response plan is important is because we don't know what's in front of us, and we have to be ready to react to any situation during the phases of this pandemic. And having, in the discussions with teachers, teaching in the students in your classroom and your virtual teachers, again, we go back to that premise of we wanted our teachers teaching our classes. It protects those electives at the secondary level because we may not get enough students in some of those specialized electives to have just a virtual option. It also allows for the connections between our teachers, that those are their students. So if they're a student that needs to be at home or a student that needs to be in person, that teacher is teaching that student. That is why it was important when we're looking at schedules, and again, guidance legislatively is going to be needed to finalize, but providing that additional time for teachers at the end of each day to work with the planning for their virtual students was critical. We know that that time is going to be needed, and that collaboration time during PLCs is going to be needed. But that plan for teachers teaching in person and remote students was because we were trying to protect those specialized electives and create those relationships between those students. Because I said it earlier, this is crisis management that we're doing right now. This is not long-term planning. This is getting us through this pandemic, and at some point, hopefully very soon, we will be on the other side of this. And my goal is to keep us as close to where we were prior to the pandemic with our instructional and electives, those strong instructional electives that we've had all along.
Technology-wise, I know making a commitment for kids that are going online to get technology that they need if they don't have it. What's it look like as far as technology in school? Karen mentioned that one of the science teachers had emailed us about having a lot of tools available, online tools that kids can use to work together in groups, because I know a lot of people said we just need to get kids going back to school and back to normal, but it's not going to be normal. They're going to be wearing a mask, sitting in a seat, facing straight ahead, and spread out as much as possible. So it's not going to be talk to your partner, get in a small group, do a lab. It's not going to be that. So what's our technology resources look like for those that are in school in person so that they can use technology in the classroom to do some of the maybe the hands-on things virtually right there in the classroom?
Well, I want to address what it will look like for students returning. Now, it may not look, and it certainly won't look, what school looked like prior to the pandemic. But our new normal, I think, will become less new and more normal as we move forward. And we will be able to create situations where collaboration and discussion may not look like it used to, but is still critical for the development of students in the learning environment. So to say that it won't be a great, outstanding educational experience, I think it is shortchanging the possibilities that we have in front of us. But to address what the technology or the innovative ways that we can reach students differently, that is a lot of what's happening during those trainings and what we're hoping will happen during the PLC collaboration times each Wednesday. That's why that time is critical for teachers to get together and share ideas and resources for reaching their students, both in the classroom and virtually, as we work ourselves through this pandemic.
Do we have any other questions?
I didn't want to interrupt Todd. I want to piggyback on what he said about social distancing. Today when we spoke, I was in the impression that 25% were going to be online, which would have been closer to 900 kids, and now it's only 500 kids. And again, I know there are some that still haven't opted, but right now we have 87%. If we have 500 out of 3,800, we only have 13% taken it online. That leaves a lot more kids in school. I was thinking if 25% of the kids are gone, we have a lot more room. So I guess we're going to have to wait until we find out really how many kids are going to be gone.
Yes. Keeping in mind that the requirements for Phase 4 safe return to school were put together by healthcare professionals and people guiding the governor, letting us know that it is safe to return if we put all of the required protocols in place, which our plan includes all of the required and most of the strongly recommended protocols.
So just going back to that one more time, will the district be meeting with Terry regarding those 5 MEA points that they are asking about? Will that be happening?
Yes, it will.
You know, if this number stays high, like Karen had just mentioned, I know that some people expressed today that they're not interested in hybrid. I personally like the hybrid option because it allows for spacing. I know you just mentioned that's a strongly recommended, not required. Is it even something that would be considered if the numbers are so high that we just say we're going to be really too crowded in our cafeterias and hallways? Would we, as a third option, would we consider going down that road if we felt like it was too, because I know we don't have all the answers yet. We don't know how many kids. Would we consider that as a third option?
With this being a fluid situation and numbers still coming in and we're waiting for legislative decisions so we can make finalized plans and letting parents make their decisions, this is a constantly evolving plan. But when you talk about the hybrid option, again, the pandemic and this quick adjustment in our learning options, some of the research coming back that the hybrid options are causing increased points of contact for school districts that have adopted that. Meaning if you have a group of students that come on Monday but don't come to school on Tuesday, they are somewhere else on Tuesday, which most of the times mean they're out in the community somewhere, and they create more points of contact, and then when they come back to school the following day, they bring those points of contact with them. For elementary schools, some of the research showing districts that have adopted hybrid plans have, during the pandemic, have elementary students that are coming on different days, and during their off days when they're not in school are in daycare or babysitting situations, which again increases those points of contact that they bring to school with them the next day. What's being flushed out with these different plans is having students in school for an extended period of time, making the least amount of points of contact is the safest. So that plan that our secondary schools were looking at, where we had extended class periods for 3 times a day, is proving to be one of the ones that is flushing out to have the least points of contacts and mitigates the spread of the virus. But we will need to look at our numbers as this situation evolves over the next weeks.
Or does the plan that you presented today that we're supposed to vote on allow for the flexibility that we need to adjust as, because like right now, you know, you made a case against, you know, the hybrid option, but as things change and evolve and new research comes out, decisions are made, do we have the flexibility that we need within that plan to react to new information?
Yes, I believe that we do, because the plan is the required protocols and many of the strongly recommended protocols as outlined by the governor. As the information changes or comes in and is different, we can adjust the options but knowing we can't adjust any of the required protocols in place. Instruction in this plan, I'll go back to the beginning of when I was talking about this presentation. This plan was designed to be a health and safety plan that we are giving assurances to our community and to me as the administrator, to the school board, that we have looked at all of the required protocols and included them in our plans in order for us to open. That is why it needs to go to the RISA, to your regional instructional agency, your ISD or RISA, by the 17th, to then be submitted to the state. So we're assuring the governor that we have looked at all the required protocols and included them in our return to school plan.
And one final thing, I think, will we then, because you said planning is going to continue to go on right up until, will we again as a board then have an opportunity to see a more updated and specific plan and to vote on that as well?
Yes, because this plan was not intended to be an instructional plan. This is a health and safety plan. The instructional pieces especially with the legislation and MDE chiming in on the pieces of legislation that we need to create a specific plan, we don't have those yet. So the timeline for this plan being August 15th was put in place for health and safety plans. The plans for our learning and instruction will come in the next few weeks as we get more guidelines.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one more question, and it's about dropping off and picking up. If you have parents picking up their students, how will they do that? The parents aren't going to be allowed to come into the building like they were before.
Each of the schools, each of the individual schools are working on their pickup and drop-off plan that works best with their facilities.
But we'll minimize the number of
Yes.
extra people. Okay.
Yes, with the goal always being minimizing those points of contact.
Okay, do we have any other questions this evening?
I do have a question about, if we do have a large percentage of our students back in the classroom, and if we are starting to see positive COVID cases, whether it's with teachers or with students, who and how are decisions made about when it's time to close the classroom, when it's time to close a building, when it's time to close down the district? I know you'll rely on the health department, but I feel like there needs to be some additional information about how are we keeping people safe if we do have unfortunate outbreaks within the district.
One of the pieces of the Phase 4 Return to School Roadmap, although it gives the local health department authority over the screening protocols, the testing protocols, and the notification, it still gives local control to the school district to make decisions about whether or not they want to change their learning plan, or open or close a facility. So as a school district, I expect, just as our county has, we will be continually updating the board and our community how our reentry and our reopening plan is going. And if there ever becomes a point based on the data that we feel we need to make a different decision, we have that local, you have as a school board, that local control. We don't have to wait for the health department to make that decision for us. We can do that.
And if there is a positive case of either a teacher or a student, can you speak to kind of the communication cascade? How are we getting that information out to our families and our community?
Yes, the health department has provided to us 2 letters that will go home. One is for the school, the school building, that there was a positive COVID test within the school, and that you are being notified, and at the bottom it gives the parents the information they need about contacting the health department if they have questions. Those letters don't require contact, but it gives the numbers that they can contact if they do have questions. Then we have a letter from the health department that will go home via Skyward. The other one will be Skyward as well, for a classroom. So something that's a little bit closer to a positive case, so that the parents are informed if there's a positive case in the class. And again, we'll give them the contact steps if they have questions. But the health department will be conducting the investigations. School districts will be supplying the names for the contact tracing so that they can conduct those investigations.
And then my last question relates to the survey. So let's just say once the window closes, you have 100 families that you haven't heard from either way. Are we reaching out to them, or are we saying if we don't hear from you, you automatically go into one of the 2 buckets?
We are having, the default position will be the face-to-face instruction. But if we haven't heard from a family regarding their selection, we may choose to reach out. But right now, we're hoping that the families that want the online will select the online, and those that want the in-person will plan to return in person.
Anybody else? Okay, so at this time, all in favor of approving the COVID-19 preparedness and response plan as presented this evening, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, so that motion carries. I'd just like to thank the board right now for all of the work they've done on this, their questions, concerns, and finally, your insightful decision making and putting our students first. I'm very proud of our district, our superintendent, all the work of our teachers and support staff over the last few months. And I believe this is a perfect example of why the East China School District is a true leader in our county. We are taking that first step, and we're brave enough to make sure that we're going to buckle down and always do what's best for our students. So thank you all very much for your work on this important matter this evening. And with that, we are adjourned.